Yo, what's up everyone? We are gonna do another video today. Surprisingly, I got a few requests for this video. Didn't really expect this one. My mind just like wasn't there. But y'all were wanting to hear what are some speedrunning comps for 10 man in Classic Wrath. So I think this will be a really fun series, because I do think that a lot of these speedrunning comps will shift over the phases. So we're just going to start with just phase one, and more particularly, we're going to go with only just a Naxx speedrunning comp for this video. I don't think Obsidian Sanctum or EOE are going to be big speedrunning raids. Honestly, they're just cheesy. They're just one boss. They're just Zerg, 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 and those will probably just be running, 10 arcane mages basically. Um, I don't think those are going to be fun. Today, we're only talking about Naxx. I think the speedrunning community is going to have a lot of fun with Next, even though a lot of it has already been done with vanilla, with classic WoW. I think the 10-man speedrunning idea is going to be really, really fun. I think I'm actually going to get really into it as well. So let's jump right in. I have two comps for us today to look at. One's kind of a caster heavy comp, one's kind of a melee heavy comp. And so we'll look at those. First off, I do want to take a quick look at this. These are the top 10 speed runs of 10 man for Kara. These are the top three, actually. And so just kind of want to take a glance at like what's the meta right now in classic TBC for speedrunning for 10 mans. Most of the meta is looking like it's going to be running a prop paladin because they're extremely good AoE tanks for trash. You're going to try to solo heal as much as you can. As you can see, this third group is a little bit different than these top two, but you get the idea. You're running as few melee as possible. Obviously, your Fury Word is going to have like really well sustained trash damage. Enhance is going to be super strong, buffing the tanks and buffing the other melee, like your Feral Druid who's constantly swapping. And then you just run as the meta casters who are buffing each other. You got your double Warlock here, double Warlock here. You got one Warlock here. Arcane Mage, of course. Your Shadow Priest for that mana. I think a lot of these kind of trends will actually translate well into Classic Wrath. Now let's jump into the Classic Wrath tiers, speedrunning comps that I have. And this first one, this is our caster one. As you can see, we got to start off with the Protection Paladin. They are just the best tanks in the game, and honestly, it's not even close. And they're going to be really good for tanking 10-man speedruns. And why they're really good is because of a lot of reasons. One, they bring Paladin buffs, so you don't have to bring any other Paladin if you take one, especially for a caster group who really just wants kings. You don't care so much about wisdom, especially with a speedrunning comp, and none of these other classes need Blessing of Might except for your Unholy. And so you run a Protection Paladin for your Paladin buffs. They also have really good raid CDs with your raid sack if you need it, and they're just really, really high paced tanks. If you ever get a Protection Paladin in your 5-man dungeons, you'll see like that they can keep up the pace really well because they never have mana issues, and they always have CDs available to tank AoE mobs. Specifically in Naxx, they're always going to have their Holy Wrath up to not only do a bunch of AoE damage, but to stun all the mobs around them. They're just going to be really, really good for keeping that pace and making sure that they are always pushing for high speed. This is important because we're basically treating Naxx 10 as like a 10-man dungeon. We are trying to Zerg this as fast as possible. So a lot of your classes that are actually good for 5-man dungeons are going to be really good in 10-man Naxx. We stack this comp the way that we do because we're basically trying to get all the caster buffs as possible. And I think we do a really good job of achieving that with this comp. We have our Unholy DK, who is providing the spell power buff. And this spell power buff is 13% increased spell power damage. Now, technically, your Balance Druid brings this same buff, but they only apply it to single target. Basically, any mob that they're hitting with their Wrath or Starfire. Your Unholy actually brings this via AoE. So they're really, really good for these trash runs, for all the trash that we're going to encounter during Naxx, because they're applying that spell power damage buff to all the mobs that they're hitting. All they got to do is apply their diseases and spread them, and instantly all your casters are going to be doing a lot more damage to their trash. So we really want that Unholy. I think they're a very core part to this comp. On top of that, we have 3 Arcane Mages. Now, Arcane is just going to be over over the top strong in tier 7. We really want to just like push those boss kill times so that we can focus on zerging or skipping trash. And so your arcane is just going to have insane numbers. You got to stack your arcane mages as much as possible here. I'm taking in an elemental shaman for a couple reasons. One, we need a shaman to drop spell haste. We got to have that spell haste totem. And two, we got to have a shaman that's going to do bloodlust. So our bloodlust heroism, we have to have a shaman for that. We take elemental here because I think they're going to do the most damage out of elemental or enhance. And I didn't want to take a resto shaman. We'll get to that in a minute though. And I think the elemental will do more than enhance here because they're just getting buffed from all these other places in the raid comp. Although enhance is going to be very good in this tier. We take Balance Root for a couple of reasons. They're bringing us some buffs as well. They give us a battle res and an innervate. I think that innervate could be pretty crucial on your Discipline Priest here, or any healer that you take in this comp. And plus, for speedrunning comps, you gotta have at least one battle res. I know, like, in a perfect world, you're not dying, especially when we talk about going undying in Naxx, but you never know what's gonna happen, and you don't want to take the time to have to res someone. Sure, we have 2 Soul Stones available, but every good speedrunning comp will have at least one druid just to cover up for that one error. You gotta have a battle res. Next, we are taking 2 warlocks. One, of course, being your demonology warlock. Now they're actually bringing the same kind of buff that elemental is bringing by increasing the spell power of your raid, but they could be bringing more than the elemental at this point. It depends on their gear, honestly, and it depends on their playstyle. If they're not going to be saving their pets so they can buff the raid, they might just be full on zerging. And I think demonology actually might be better than affliction here. Like you might actually just run 2 demonology warlocks, maybe even 3 demonology warlocks, because they're so good on trash. Um, you'll see a lot of people actually running just demonology for when they do their heroic queues, because demonology does so much more damage than affliction. So you may actually end up running demonology for all of 10-man Naxx as well for that same reason. Um, that's up for debate. We'll have to see how that actually shakes out in Classic Wrath, but don't sleep on demonology. I think they're going to be really, really strong here. I do put affliction here with the idea that this could flex into another demonology warlock as well, but I do think affliction is going to be one of your top DPS in this comp. They're going to be really, really good on every single boss fight, and of course, these warlocks never have mana issues. We do kind of keep in mind mana issues with these speedrunning comps because we don't want to spend any time sitting and drinking. Of course, we have our 2 arcane mages and then the solo heal disc priest. We take disc priest because we want the stamina and spirit buffs that priest bring and the shadow protection. But also your disc priest brings PI on top of the fact that they're already a really, really good healer. So if I'm gonna have one healer solo healing, I think I'd probably rather have a holy paladin. In fact, solo healing on disc in Naxx 10 might be really rough. Here's some fights that you're gonna want to keep in mind for your disc priest solo healing. First one's gonna be Patchwork. Their kit is pretty rough for tank healing. You're gonna have your power word shield on both tanks. You could penance one when they take a spike, and then you're just kind of stuck to resort to flash healing them. They're really not gonna be too good. Speaking of Patchwork, your Unholy here, in theory, is gonna be putting on tank gear and just off tanking on Patchwork. But yeah, your Discipline Priest is gonna have a hard time on Patchwork. I think you can easily solo heal it. It shouldn't be too much of an issue, especially if you have some gear. And then another fight that's gonna be tough is Lotheb. Hopefully, your Protection Paladin has enough gear to solo tank Lotheb, and if they can't solo tank it while standing still, you maybe have to ping pong it with your Unholy DK. And that's something that isn't an issue. Your Unholy DK doesn't have to swap to tank gear to ping pong. You just ping pong and kite the boss, and your Discipline Priest should have a hard time with that, but a manageable time with that. They'll be okay. Um, Now, a couple things that we're missing here is if we wanted to replace one person in this comp, it would probably be one of the arcane mages. So you don't have to technically run 3. Maybe you replace this one of the warlocks here, this affliction lock. And so what could our 10th person be if we were going to replace someone? I would think you either go with another demonology warlock. That's one option. You could go with a survival hunter here. I think the quality of life of having a misdirect is actually going to be really useful, especially just to increase the pace, pull more trash, make sure that your tank has good single target threat, and your survival hunter is actually going to bring replenishment because this group has zero replenishment. Hopefully, mana isn't too much of an issue to need it, but that's something to keep in mind. Another option is you could take a Shadow Priest. Now, your Shadow Priest is going to do pretty good damage, but they also bring replenishment. And so it's kind of similar to a Hunter, except they're actually going to get buffed from everyone in this group. So they're probably going to do more damage than a Hunter would in this group. And then lastly, maybe you even bring a Fire Mage in this comp. I know Fire Mage is going to be a pretty undervalued DPS in Naxx 10 in all of Tier 7 because they're missing so much hit and they're missing so much crit. But they could actually be really, really strong for trash, depending on how much trash you have to do in order for these kill times to count. So we'll see about all that. But there's definitely some wiggle room with this comp. This is just kind of like my idea of a caster comp that's going to be a speedrunning comp for Naxx 10. Now I got one more comp for us to look at, and this is our melee comp. And right off the bat, you can see we're taking 5 Death Knights, 4 of which are Frost. I know the Frost Death Knight stack is a little memey looking, and we're missing a lot more buffs with this group than the last one, but just give me a second to explain it all. First off, we take the Protection Paladin because for all the same reasons for the last comp, they're the best tank. I would rather have Protection than any other tank for a speedrunning comp. And then real quick, we're going to go Unholy Paladin here. Unholy shouldn't have any issues with any fight solo healing at all. They're going to be fantastic for literally everything in the game for solo healing, all of Naxx. One thing to keep in mind, one of these Frosty Caves will probably be your off tank that needs to throw on tank gear for Patchwork and for Thaddeus. But that's pretty much it. And what's good about taking 2 Paladins is we get Kings and we get Might. We don't want to have to take a Warrior because I think Warriors are just going to be garbage for this. We take 2 Paladins for Might. Our Enhancement Shaman's bringing our attack power buff, and he's going to be bringing our Bloodlust. So we want that. Our Unholy is going to be bringing all the same things that Unholy normally brings, except for the added effect we're getting the disease damage increase. So all of our Death Knights are going to be doing more with their diseases. Combat is bringing that physical vulnerability for us, and just tricks of the trade and just normal rogue things that they bring, which is basically nothing. So we get our rogue for that. We get feral for the crit. We also get our feral for the battle res and innervate in case we ever need it. It's always good to have. Your feral could also be the tank here. They could just go bear and tank for Thaddeus or for Patchwork. And of course, we take Death Knights because these Frost DKs are going to be just incredible. They're always going to be really, really high single target Naxx in tier 7, and they're always going to be really, really high on trash. They do so much damage. It's just going to be a really good class to stack for a melee comp. And so we're bringing a ton of buffs to buff our melee here. Now, a few things that we're missing. We're missing a fair amount here. We're missing our 3% haste, just flat haste that we get from either a Boomy or a Ret Paladin. And we're missing 3% damage, just straight up 3% damage from your Ret, your BM Hunter, or your Arcane Mage that bring that. We're also missing our melee hit from Fairy Fire that the Boomkin brings. So we're kind of missing a decent amount. In this comp, I would say that your melee should be bringing more hit so that you don't have to take a Boomy. It's just not worth it. The only other solution there is you take a Hunter and they Scorpid Sting. And that's just going to be a big DPS loss. I don't think that's really worth. I mean, maybe it's worth it. It's definitely up for debate. This 10th person, like you could replace one of these DKs with a Hunter and do that. That's certainly an option. You could even replace one of these Death Knights with a Rut Paladin so that you get that 3% damage, so that you get that 3% haste. You could. I don't know if it's worth it. I don't really think that Rut Paladin's going to do a whole lot of damage right now. They're going to do good, but I don't think that I would rather take a Ret Paladin over a Frost DK in this theory. But you totally could. There's definitely wiggle room with this melee cleave comp. You even could, as memey as it sounds, you could take a BM Hunter in this group. I know BM Hunter's pretty trash, but they're actually pretty decent in dungeons, and they just do really good damage for free without needing a whole lot of gear to do that damage, because so much of it is coming from your pet, and we get the added effect of getting that 3% damage from the BM Hunter. So they could be decent, although I'd probably rather take a Survival Hunter. Honestly, if I'm going to take one, I'd rather have a Survival Hunter here. And you could even meme around by maybe say, take a Prot Warrior and a Rep Paladin. Prot Warrior, as much as I shit on them, they're actually going to be pretty decent for 10-man Naxx because it's so easy. They'll be able to chain pull really quickly. They'll have high uptime, and they can bring either commanding for themselves, or they can just bring your Blessing of Might that you'd be missing through Battle Shout if you happen to have if you happen to drop one of these paladins. Definitely some wiggle room though with both of these comps. Don't take them as straight up. You need all 10 of these in order for it to work. There's a lot of room where you can debate and kind of flex. But this is kind of my two comps that I would run for a Naxx 10 speedrunning comp. I'll definitely be having a lot of fun with this when Classic Wrath comes. I think this will be a new way to approach Naxx Ramus because right now, approaching Naxx is kind of you do it for a couple weeks so you can get the loot, and then you basically never do it again. The only reason you step back into Naxx 10 is if you really want to go for achievements, which is like Undying or the Glory, so you can get them out. I think speedrunning will be really fun. I think we'll have to do more videos like this in the future, especially for Old War, especially for ICC. I think those are going to be crazy. Those raids are way longer than Naxx. They're way more complicated. There's way more going on with those raids, and we'll have to really adjust these speedrunning comps for that. But that's it for this video. Thanks guys for tuning in. Keep commented down below if you want me to do certain videos. Just let me know. I'm reading every comment that I get, and I will definitely take all your suggestions into consideration. All right, peace.